One last piece of the music picture I want to touch on is Sacrosanctum Concilium number 120. It says, the pipe organ is to be held in high esteem in the Latin Church, for it is the traditional musical instrument, the sound of which can add a wonderful splendor to the Church's ceremonies and powerfully lifts up men's minds to God and higher things. So why the organ? It's place of tradition. Outside of the musical voice, it is the only instrument that the Church approved up until basically the production of this document. So for 1960 years, more or less, the organ was the other instrument other than the voice. And you can look at the language specifically to see why the Church holds it in high esteem. It adds splendor to the ceremonies and lifts up man's heart and mind. And think about it. In a very simple sense, music from an organ, and I would argue to some extent too, music played beautifully in other instruments, lifts our consciousness up to the divine. It brings us to encounter the love of God in a particular way. But the Church also recognizes and warns simply against any language or any instrument that do not bring us to that place. And so, specifically looking at number 120, he says, other instruments may also be admitted for use in divine worship, in the judgment and with the consent of the competent authority, only on condition that the instruments are suitable or can be made suitable for sacred use, that they are in accordance with the dignity of the temple and contribute to the edification of the faithful. So it comes back to the soul, that what's the purpose of sacred music? Glorify God, sanctify humanity. So any instrumentalization or any improvisation on instruments that don't lead us into those things is, cannot be tolerated. And so going to a jazz mass where there's a 25 music interlude after communion, if I want to go to that, I'm going to go to a Dave Matthews Band concert because I want to experience that at a Dave Matthews Band concert. I don't go to mass to hear somebody play the guitar well. I don't go to mass to hear somebody play any of their instruments in any way that brings undue attention to themselves, but only to lead me always towards God. So I'm going to move on now to sacred art and architecture. Sacrosanctum Concilium number 122 says the fine arts are rightly classed among the noblest activities of man's genius. This is especially true of religious art and of its highest manifestation, sacred art. The Holy Mother Church has always been the patron of the fine arts and has ever sought their noble ministry to the end especially that all things set apart for use in divine worship should be worthy, becoming, and beautiful signs and symbols of things supernatural. So what is sacred art? How is it distinguished from religious art? How is it distinguished from art in general? Much like the music, it has an integral relationship to liturgy. So it has a very specific purpose to use in the worship of God. It's not art for the sake of art either. It's art for the sake of the sacred. And so if art or ornamentation within the church doesn't lead us towards God, we call it the vertical ornamentation. If the art doesn't lead us towards the divine, then it really can't be said to even be sacred art. It may be nice art, but to say it's sacred art is something altogether different. And we have to be very specific when we talk about that. How do we understand things, or the notion of things set apart for sacred worship? Is a chair, for example, a piece of sacred art? Well, no. But a presider's chair is. So the chair that the celebrant sits in at the Mass should be something dignified and noble and worthy of what's occurring. The cathedra, the chair which the bishop sits in, has a specific notion in the history of the church and its sacred art. It should be something worthwhile and dignified. Likewise, that when we look into a church, we don't look at it as a building to be used for, to be left in purpose to be named later. It's for sacred worship. And so understanding how the sacred space, the art and the architecture which surrounds us, should lead us to greater worship of God himself. So So there are things set apart for use in divine worship that we need to always be cognizant of as being sacred art and not just function. The church goes on to speak of, in number 123, this specific line: the church has not adopted any particular style of art as her own. One of the benefits of that is that she's not tied specifically to a type of art. That through the ages, she can see the genius of man expressing itself. You know, this piece of art, which is kind of more classic iconography, can be held as beautiful. But at the same time, this image of St. Francis over here, which is a completely different style of art, can also be said to be beautiful. This is why the church doesn't say one specific type is the be-all and end-all. But she does have principles behind sacred art and beauty and what she expects. But she permits this kind of non-constriction because she wants to be culturally relevant. So the idea of having thousands of icons in a Western Rite church is a little weird. We're not, that's not part of our tradition. But we recognize the beauty of this piece of art, and we can use it in a church specifically to help us with our greater veneration of Mary without it becoming, is this some kind of imposition of the East on the West? No. It's understanding that there's beauty here, there's harmony that leads us towards God himself. But we also, the consequence of not choosing a particular style is the church always has to constantly be critical. She has to be looking at what she is willing to put into her churches. She must be looking at the styles of churches she builds, the organization in those churches, and be able and willing to say that's not really worthy of worship. I'm sure many of you have been into churches sometimes where you've been like, well, that's really ugly. And you know what? Your intuition generally is right. And the church doesn't, she probably, the competent ecclesial authority, which is the bishop, he may not even know that set of stations across the church. And so if nobody's brought it to his attention, he's none the wiser. But if you walk into a church and you recognize that there's something very beautiful in here, you want to talk about that, actually. So you'll tell them about that. Don't be afraid to talk to your priest about when you walk to the church. How are these things orienting me towards God? We need to be able to be critical of them. We need to understand what their purpose is. In my opinion, the solution is that we promote within the church itself fine arts and sacred art again. That we really promote through our hiring of good artists. Some of you know I'm a bit of a liturgical vestment snob. I've made a lot of beautiful vestments. There's a reason. It's not because I like to wear pretty stuff. It's because you deserve to see beauty in the liturgy. And so I'm going to commission artists to help me do that. Likewise, we commission artists to paint beautiful things and build beautiful statues. This helps promote a real sense of what is sacred and beautiful. And the church is always looking to do that, but she doesn't always have the means. So if you can help with that, not literally by providing the money, but by providing the images. Maybe some of you are artistic and you want to draw or you want to paint some kind of beautiful art to give to the church. We'll talk to the priest about it. Talk to the bishops about it. Say, I want to make this gift. What do you have in mind? Doing it so us who are imbued with multiple degrees upon this very subject, we can look at it with the eyes of the church in terms of theology, in terms of architecture, in terms of history, in terms of culture, all these things, so that we're helping to make judicial judgments, and not asking, commissioning a piece of art and somebody sending us stations across the stick. We want to really be aware of how that art and architecture is going to lead us towards God. And so I want to close by talking about what we have not talked about. And so this may touch on some of the more sensitive issues. But where did we see, or did we see at any point in the Vatican, on the Constitution of the Sacred Liturgy, anything about a minimalism in messages? We didn't. Where did we see at any point a suppression of the use of Latin in the liturgy? We didn't. Where did we see at any point a suppression of the the life of the faithful. What did we see? We saw an open, a greater exploration of the life of the faithful in liturgy. But did she fundamentally change anything about it? Did the church fundamentally change anything about the liturgy itself? No. She simply stated some very basic guidelines in which we may come to more fully understand how we can fully and consciously and actively participate in sacred liturgy. And so what is it that she did? She gave us an emphasis, as the lay faithful particularly, but for the ordained and those in formation for orders, to understand more simply what the liturgy is and what it's about. And so I encourage you to go back and read this wonderful document. It's not in 35 pages, it's not even that long. To understand, get a very good basic understanding of what is going on in the liturgy. And what did she say we are to do? We're to promote vigorously good and useful liturgy, because it'll lead the faithful to greater worship. And ultimately, that's what's desired in the whole liturgical renewal, that we understand what Pope Pius and St. Pius did in the early 1900s, so that we may more faithfully worship God, we understand what we're doing. And the church has opened up opportunities to do that. Liturgical commissions, teaching classes like this, inviting people to read, and then this, era in which every info is at literally at your fingertips, that you can learn more about the liturgy so that you're more well informed. And so when you come to the liturgy to fully, consciously, actively participate, your being there is informed, right? This being and doing, this being there is well informed. So a few more outstanding questions. Did Rome at any point say that the priest has to take the seat? In the 156 documents related to, I think 156 and 158 documents related to the liturgy following this, none of them said anything specifically about the priest facing the people. However, I'll let you know this, in the rubric, which is what we do in the Mass, not what we say, it's what we do, in the old rite, the priest had to look at the people 8 times. In the new rite, the ordinary form, the priest is only required to look at the people 6 times. Many of us would have never even thought about that. So actually, in the liturgy itself, as it stands today, the priest is only required to look at the people versus possibly 6 times. Rome never said we had to turn around. Rome did talk about the orientation of the altar, that it permits the priest to look at the people. And so, how did that whole dynamic come into play? Why is it now when Father tries to offer a Mass facing with the people, oriented towards God, that he's chastised and said, oh no, he's trying to do something he shouldn't, when nowhere in the church's documents does it say specifically he can. And it's not about selfishness, brothers and sisters. It's really about understanding the liturgy. Simple analogy. It's used, taken straight out of the Sacrosanctum itself. It says in the beginning, we're a pilgrim church. So we're pilgrims on earth. And when you're a pilgrim, what do? You journey and you follow. And so the one at the front of the pilgrimage journey, most of the time has his back to you because he's leading you somewhere. And he'll turn around and he'll give instructions, say, you got to watch out for this, you got to do this. And he turns and he keeps on going. Brothers and sisters, this is not a push because I don't have anything vested in it. But I want you to think about the vertical horizontal connection. We've talked about this a lot. And I think a very preeminent place where this becomes obvious is the orientation of the designer. If he's looking at you and talking to you, how is he leading you in worshiping God? And this is a little bit of devil's advocate, but I also want you to think, as a priest, I can tell you now how strenuous it can be sometimes, because I feel like all the pressure is on me, like I'm some kind of actor in a play. Nothing can be further from the truth. I'm a priest. I'm Joe Priest. I'm up there be there on behalf of and for the people of God to offer worship and sacrifice. Now, think about that. If somebody explained that to you 40 years ago or something, if they'd have just said, Bob, the reason the priest looks with you in the same direction is because he's presiding in the person of Christ. And when he turns to you, it's not coming out of the mountains or anything like that. He's turning to you to give instructions. That's exactly what this document says. The priest needs to give better instruction on the liturgy. If somebody had just explained that, I don't think we'd have the tensions we have. Now the idea, and I know from personal experience, my pastor at St. Mary's went to orient the celebration for Advent for 4 weeks. 4 weeks he did an oriental celebration in the parish. Daily mass attendance was between 40 and 50 people. 2 people wrote the letter. And you know what the first one was? Father, thanks for explaining why you're doing what you're doing. The second one, Father, can you explain a little bit more about what you're doing? No negative, the reaction generally was, well, this is different, but it's not necessarily negative because we're explaining. And so, I will explain to you, so I'm, blue in the face, why we do what we do in the liturgy. And I'm not saying, certainly here, we're not going to be turning around anything anytime soon. But to think about why we're doing what we're doing, that really is the impetus, this whole, Jason and Eric and I were talking, why should we do a series on the Second Vatican Council? Because we don't know what it says. Most of us don't really know what it says. And so we want to know what it says. There's a few more outstanding questions I'm sure you have, and so now I'm going to try to open up some of those. That's just a little thought process to go with this whole, at the end of the liturgy documents, what about this one big thing? Yes, ma'am.
I'm in a position in this world in such a time that I've seen it this way and
right.
We did all this. Now it's just ridiculous. You want to go back to what we were doing.
Right.
And
or do I just want to do what we've always supposed to be doing? That's the other question. Is it what I want to do? No. It's what does the church expect us to do? And so it's a real legitimate concern.
I'm trying to be.
Right. Then we jumped off the ship. Now we're trying to get back on. Right.
And now we're getting right back to where it was in the beginning. If I'm fortunate enough to live here long, I might see it.
You might see it.
But honest to goodness, I see a lot of all those beautiful altars.
Right.
Where do they go? All those beautiful, some of you here may remember all those altars that were golden nails. I don't know if they were alabaster or what they were.
Well,
but they were beautiful. And there's one at the hospital still.
yeah, we just got to go find it. The church at the hospital. Yeah,
and they all had altars. Every church got
They did.
altars. But they got rid of them. They got rid of all the statues.
I know, but we realized after going through this, though, that wasn't it. And so we have to take into account the fact how much our humanity kind of skewed these documents to say what we wanted it to say. Whereas if we take the time to really look at it, the church, being the typical church, she's extremely conservative by nature. Extremely. She wants to hold on to her tradition because that's what Christ empowered her to do through the Holy Spirit. So look at the apostles, look at the living tradition, see how we can preserve it, see what's good in it. And so, I don't know the direction. To be honest with you, as a priest, it's very humbling to be a priest in this state because 10 years ago, if I would have been wearing a cassock and a fiddleback, as most of you know, I would have probably gotten thrown out of the diocese. Well, Bishop Perron probably wouldn't have any issues with it, but it's a different time, but it's really it's a better understanding. We're very blessed to be 40 years removed. Council takes literally hundreds of years to really take implementation. The Council of Trent didn't see its golden era. The Council of Trent, 1545 to 1563, the golden era of Trent was really the 1800s. So it takes time. We have to continue to discern. But now you're a little bit more acknowledgement. Going home, you can understand maybe a little bit more about what the church desires. I've left some books on the back. I encourage you to maybe write down some of what, just looking at them, what you think you may want to read more about. The one thing that every Catholic should actually read about the liturgy is called the General Instructions of the Roman Catholic. Because that tells you, yes, Phil has my copy. That's the most updated translation I want you to get. Because it tells you what's supposed to happen in Mass. I mean, literally, it's play by play. It tells you everything. Sometimes it's the most mundane detail. But at least you'll know exactly what's going on. Yes, please.
Something that makes me feel close to God, and you can change that.
Right.
So who makes that?
Holy Mother Church, because she's been entrusted with the authority to do so by the power of the Holy Spirit. And if we look at it, again, just from a very human standpoint, one person's opinion is sacred, as you said, could be very different from others. But when you have the magisterium, the teaching office of the church, you have a collection of experts that suggest these documents, and a sacred art commission, actually a diocesan commission on sacred art, you have experts, you have people who are formed in culture, formed in art, history, formed in mediums of art, things so that this conversation is had by basically a group of experts instead of one person. But fundamentally what we should, in a very simple thing, sacred is for God. Secular. So the simple thing that I go back to not being like John Denver. John Denver did not like sacred. He might have wrote things that made your soul feel good and brought you into the heights, but fundamentally it's not sacred. He never intended to. He didn't say, I'm writing sacred, use it for sacred worship. So John Denver does not replace it. Likewise, the Tantum Ergo, I don't think it's ever going to be a smash secular hit. It should be, but it probably won't be. Jason?
And I was just add that there are definitely guiding principles, especially the biggest one would be objective. That there can be some use of shapes and forms for each one to particularly to interpret it. So there has to be the there's objectively a woman and a child. That we can understand as married and a child. There can't be and it's always one time the metal is there's a kind of a version there's no objectivity to that. There's nothing for the mind to grasp. Everything, any meaning that art holds is in your mind. Whereas the meaning of like that piece of the meaning of those pieces of art are held within the art itself, and they point to things more people. So there has to be objectivity first off in that art, something for your mind to grasp and then to move. There can't be this complete subjectivity, along with the normal kind of guidelines of art, and more things like that. There is a lot that goes.
That's why building a church. I mean, for example, and I do want to close this time. The Sagrada Familia is a church in Spain. It's been being built for almost 120 years. It's still not done. Because they realized at points in time that church was going in directions it didn't need to be going. Its artistic objectivity of sacred art was lost. And so the church has stopped building it. Because it's not pointing towards God, it's pointing towards that, just our human subjectivity, something to satisfy us. And so, if the church is still, it's been dedicated, both Benedict is dedicated to the church and what you say, but still parts that are being built because he went in and he said, whoa, what's going on? How is this according with Catholic principles of sacred art? Looking at what the Constitution and sacred liturgy tells us. So, these questions have to be really heavily considered. I'll close with one little anecdote so that you don't all walk away thinking we're going to just turn over the church and say, do whatever you want. When I got here 5 months ago, you noticed that Father Bernhardt had already put an altar crucifix on the altar in the cathedral. And then there was the altar crucifix above the tabernacle. And then there's also the crucifix, the processional crucifix. And so there's 3 crucifixes in our sanctuary. And Father McLaughlin and I, and Father Bernhardt, when he's around, and Father Lopez, now that he's back, we'll all have to discuss with the bishop, because this is the bishop's church, what we're going to do. Because fundamentally, there's beauty in all that, sure. There's the objectivity of looking at the image of Christ crucified is always good. But is it leading us to greater worship, or is the multiplication of signs creating some kind of tension? See, so we're thinking about it. Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't even think about it. We're thinking about it. So I just want you to know that we take this stuff very seriously, and we really hope that the cathedral parish will continue to be kind of a flagship for the diocese of what the liturgy looks like. But that takes a lot of work on our part and on your part too. So I want to encourage you to just be faithful and continue to ask questions as much as you can so that we can. We're never going to be perfect in our worship of God, but we're going to try darn hard to do it, okay? Thank you very much. Have a good evening.